Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 5 articles for you in this episode. All the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. I have audio, and then we'll get rolling right along here. There we go. The first one that we have here is off of Natural News, and it says, will marijuana-infused chewing gum become a recognized medical treatment? Or the medicinal value, cannabis plant is well known and consistently undervalued by mainstream medicine. However, it seems that the medical industry is finally catching up and is beginning to accept that, yes, a plant can indeed be medicine. Thousands of studies have demonstrated the plant's clear medicinal value in a variety of conditions. Recognition of the plant's benefits is continuing to garner steam, so much so that we may soon see it popping up for a number of uses. In fact, chewing gum may even be on the market soon. Announced that Dutch researchers would be testing a United States-based company's cannabis gum for treatment of irritable bowel syndrome, which is commonly referred to simply as IBS. The study will be one of the first to analyze the potential effects that a cannabinoid of the marijuana plant may have on IBS. IBS is a disorder that is primarily characterized by abdominal pain and other symptoms like diarrhea, constipation, or intermittent periods of both. Suggest that between 25 and 45 million Americans alone are affected by IBS. Approximately 2/3 of IBS sufferers are female. The cause of IBS is not yet fully understood, but one thing is certain. It is a common condition that can be hard to treat. Not all treatments work for everyone, and many people never even seek out treatment. Marijuana gum be the ticket to helping millions of people? New product called Can Chew Plus was formulated by Axum Medical Marijuana Incorporated's major investment company. This latest product preceded by Can Chew, which is already on the market as a let's see, how's that pronounced? Nutraceutical, I guess that is. New formulation features CBD or cannabinoid, which is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid compound found in the marijuana plant. Dr. Stuart Titus, Medical Marijuana Incorporated, commented, "We are excited to see that Axiom has reached another milestone in its clinical development program." Stuart went on to say, "This is the first advancement in cannabinoid research for treatment of IBS in medical history and gives a clear example of how far ahead Axiom is in the program." For the trial, a total of 40 patients will be given the gum alongside another group of participants that will be given a placebo. Participants will be between the ages of 18 and 65, and all have been diagnosed with IBS according to Rome 3 criteria, which is the favored criterion for medical professionals. 50 milligrams of CBD per serving for the trial. Initial research that the gum can provide relief from some of the symptoms of IBS, like painful abdominal cramps and bloating, as well as normalized stools. Effects are likely due to the plant's compound's ability to interact with the cannabinoid receptors located in the digestive tract, where they can. Previous research has indicated that the endocannabinoid system could play a role in the onset of IBS and could also be a viable pathway for treatment of the condition. A 2008 study of neurogastroenterology and noted this possibility. The researchers also noted that turning on the CB1 and the CB2 receptors in the endocannabinoid system, hypersensitivity and motility in the gut, and that drugs capable of altering the levels of cannabinoids in the system could also help to reduce inflammation. The research team commented that it was too early to draw any conclusions. They commented that further research and clinical trials would be useful in eluding benefit of cannabinoid drugs in cannabis has a long history of being used to treat gastrointestinal distress. There is extensive anecdotal evidence of patients with IBS, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and other GI issues to help treat their condition. Hopefully, cannabis will soon be resolved so this valuable plant can be made more readily available to people with debilitating conditions in whatever form they may choose. This one is also about chewing gum, and it's also off Natural News, and it says, a dangerous compound is lurking in chewing gum. 2,500 laboratory-made substances are deliberately added to common processed food to improve their flavor, color, shelf life, texture, or cost. Another 12,000 chemicals coming from food packaging material, processing aids, and drugs given to animals unintentionally end up in our food supply. Popularity of factory-made foods, chemical additives have become a significant part of our daily diet. While some additives are harmless, others cause harm to the body. Dioxide is one of those damaging additives you cannot easily escape. It is used in a variety of everyday products, such as whitener or texturizer. The additive, which is also referred to as E171, can be found in candy, chocolate, and chewing gum, as well as in sunscreen, toothpaste, and paint. A new study published in the Journal of Nano Impact, chronic exposure to titanium dioxide nanoparticles significantly decreased the ability of the small intestines to absorb essential nutrients and act as a protective barrier against pathogens. Chronic tummy ache may be the cause. While genetically considered safe by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the Brigham University in New York found that chronic exposure to a meal's worth of titanium oxide nanoparticles can reduce the number of microvilli on intestinal cells. Microvilli are responsible for nutrient absorption, hence why some nutrients, such as iron, zinc, and fatty acids, were harder to absorb when the cells were exposed to titanium oxide. Fewer microvilli on the intestinal cells, a natural barrier to keep harmful pathogens out. Furthermore, the team found that metabolism slowed down, enzyme functions were negatively affected, and inflammation increased. Titanium oxide is a common food additive, and people have been eating a lot of it for a long time. But we were interested in some of the subtle effects, and we think people should know about them. Medical engineering assistant professor Gretchen Mahler, one of the authors of the paper, in previous research conducted in France, Luxembourg, also found that ingestion of titanium dioxide, precancerous tumor growth in 40% of the test rats that were given titanium dioxide spiked drinking water, the Independent reported. To processed foods. In 2015, Dunkin' Donuts phased out sugar with titanium dioxide nanoparticles as a result of continuous pressure from advocacy group As You Sow. Nonetheless, chances that titanium dioxide is still entering your body on a regular basis through toothpaste or processed foods. While we often believe food manufacturers have the best intentions at heart when they develop a new kind of food or product, the truth is your health isn't very high on their priority list. In fact, many large food manufacturers are more concerned about the flavor, shelf life, and the amount of money a particular product will make than about your overall health. And if you thought the government and the FDA would not allow dangerous toxins, think again. Most foods end up very little safety testing. While you think they have your back on this, you can never actually be sure what all is in your packaged foods. Avoid this damaging chemical. Professor Gretchen Miller said, avoid processed foods, especially candy, since that is where you see a lot of titanium nanoparticles. Read the food label on the back of the package and opt for organic, chemical-free dental care products to protect your family's health. It's off Natural News as well. And this one says, why is the FDA get it up here? Why is the FDA under a gag order to hide the details about a massive cheese recall? All over the last 3 weeks, I do these recall shows telling you things that have been recalled. And Sargento's, boy, they just about everything they've got, I think, has been recalled. Here's how this article reads. Sargento's recall on a number of their cheese products for possible listeria contamination has been making major headlines. But what you may not have heard is that an additional 130 kinds of cheese and products containing cheese are also under recall for contaminating the containing the same listeria contaminated cheese product by Deutsche Haus LLC. A number of different brands are involved besides Sargento. Some other brands affected are Sara Lee, Dutch Valley, Guggisberg, a variety of store brand products by Meyer, H-E-B, and other major retailers are also affected by the recall. Brands have been quite forthcoming about what products of theirs have likely been affected and what they are recalling. Should no doubt be applauded for their transparency. All of over 100 different types of cheese began early February after a random test of Amish cheese, Amish classic cheeses that Tennessee inspectors had collected from a retailer tested positive for listeria. These were manufactured by Deutsche Haus LLC. Any other cheese varieties. Officials to issue a consumer alert. Food and Drug Administration is reportedly investigating the situation in a number of states along with local officials. In federal code prevents the FDA from telling the public what companies purchased cheese from Dutch Haus. Details are apparently considered confidential corporate information. In other words, unless all of the affected brands come forward or Dutch Haus a list of all the companies to which they supplied cheese, there is no real way for the public to know what cheeses and products were affected by the listeria contamination in total. Still, because of this clause, which many are likening to a gag order, there is no de facto list of all the recalled products to turn to for answers. 130 products affected by the recall, you can imagine how difficult it would be for anyone other than the manufacturer to compile that information. FDA is bound by corporate interests is really nothing new, but this latest development just goes to show how far the federal agency will go to protect corporations before people. Ironic that the government agency cannot tell the public what companies have purchased contaminated cheese, given that the organization describes itself as a protector of the public. Their own website declares that they are fundamentally responsible for protecting the public health by assuring that foods, except for meat from livestock, poultry, and which are regulated by the USDA, are safe. sanitary, and properly labeled. What good does it do to tell the public some types of cheese have been contaminated with a disease-causing pathogen, but we can't tell you what brands of cheese are affected because it goes against corporate interests? Investigation means little when there are steps they could be taken right now to prevent infection simply by telling the public what foods may not be safe. While listeria is a serious foodborne illness, if the foods were contaminated with something more recognizable, would the agency still be singing the same tune? How would they continue to justify their inaction and indifference then? As an agency, the FDA has been scrutinized for their failure to protect the people of the country is to serve for many years. Recently, in 2015, it came to light that there was a major legal loophole that actually allowed food companies to put new additives in food without government review. How? As long as the industry itself declares the ingredients safe, there is no need for the FDA approval. Decades-old law that allows food manufacturers to skip over the federal regulation process. Potentially toxic ingredients that are added to food with little to no supervision from the FDA. It surely isn't the public. The next one we have is off of Natural News. Is killing African American women at twice the previously reported rate in spite of the HPV vaccine. Recent studies supposedly proving the effectiveness of the HPV vaccine manipulated data to make the cervical cancer death rate among Black women look much lower, according to a study recently published in the journal Cancer. Reporters had pointed to the studies as evidence that the cervical cancer rates have been falling due to vaccination against HPV, human papillomavirus, several strains of which have been linked to cervical cancer development. But the death rate of Black women from cervical cancer is actually twice as high by the studies the new analysis found. Prior research has also shown that the commercially available HPV vaccine may not protect against the virus strains most likely to infect Black women. The key. The researchers reanalyzed mortality data for the years 2000 through 2012, from the National Center for Health Statistics, or the NCHS, using a new method to calculate death rates from cervical cancer per 100,000 people. They found that previous reports had included women who had undergone complete hysterectomies that included removal of the cervix and thus had literally no risk of cancer. Removed these women from the sample, the cervical cancer death rate among white women jumped from 3.2% or 0.2 per 100,000 to 4.7, 50% increase. Jump was even more striking, from 5.7 to 100 or per 100,000, 0.1, a 77% increase. Said that the racial difference in depth is possibly due to differences in quality cervical cancer screening and care. Rates are seen in the oldest Black women, and public death efforts should focus on appropriate screening and adequate treatment in relation, they wrote. Despite the messages promoted by vaccine industry, regular pap smear screening is the most effective way to prevent death from cervical cancer. Cervical cancer is very slow growing, and when early by pap smear is almost never fatal. Because the HPV vaccine does not protect against all cancer-causing HPV, no effect on women who are already infected, and because no vaccine is 100% effective. Vaccine women still need to be screened just as frequently as unvaccinated women. This makes the vaccine practically useless from a health perspective in countries with good screening access. In fact, public health experts raised concerns that drug companies may mislead vaccinated women into skipping recommended pap smears and thus actually increase their risk of dying from cervical cancer. Risks often outweigh benefits. Harper, a researcher who helped develop the HPV vaccine, the shot's risk actually outweigh its benefits for women in wealthy countries. All three HPV vaccines, Gardasil and Gardasil 9, have been linked with serious side effects, including sudden unconsciousness, seizures, syndrome, facial paralysis, blood clots, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, ovarian failure, premature menopause, and stroke. A study in the Danish Medical Journal found that a small subset of women receiving the HPV vaccine went on to develop a cluster of neurological and autoimmune symptoms not consistent with any known disease, but falling into a specific pattern. Symptoms of this hypothetical autoimmune nervous syndrome include excessive fatigue upon standing, severe non-migraine headache, emotional disturbance, and cognitive dysfunction. Harper has also expressed concern that the HPV vaccine is being given to girls as young as 9. No evidence that it is safe or effective on girls younger than 15. She also warns that it is unknown how long protection from the vaccine lasts, so girls vaccinated too young may lose their immunity before they even become sexually active. More than 90% of HPV infections are cleared out by the immune system within 2 years. And the final article that I have for you this morning, this is off the Daily Sheeple, and it says, Neuroscientists believe they can turn off free will. Have argued whether we even have free will, but now they want to turn it off. Experiment. In the 1980s, scientist Benjamin Libet experiment. He discovered that what seems to be free will, or the conscious choice not to do something, is really just the observance of something that has already happened. This completely rocked the foundation of what most thought requisite for a human being, and the long-held religious view that free will must always be honored. People's brainwaves as they made spontaneous looking at a clock. In the study were tell the researchers the time at which they decided to wave their fingers. There were several milliseconds of preparatory brain activity prior to the time that the people reported the conscious act of waving their fingers. Were taken as gospel that free will did not exist. Now we call this preparatory action of the brain the readiness potential. What Libet's experiments failed to consider, though, was manifold. People were only conscious of an action milliseconds after they subconsciously or after a subconscious realization. It is possible that they could not indicate their intent as fast as their physical bodies could carry it out. A delay in physical versus mental activity that has been well documented, and it is also possible of the anticipated event recognized well before the actual event. Causal field is changed by our consciousness, as evidenced in experiments in physics. This is called the observer effect. Changes that the act of observation, a phenomenon being observed. Libet implies that the conscious decision act is divorced from free will, and that it is acted out nonchalantly, or try this again, not nonchalantly, non-consciously. Effective feeling of having made the decision is tagged on afterward. already know from vast amounts of research from Jung and others that we know a lot more than we consciously allow ourselves to honor. Nonetheless, Libet's experiment has weathered such criticism, and the implications have been replicated with even more advanced equipment, including the use of fMRI technology and the direct recording of neuron activity electrodes, are or eliminate free will. The point in the same troubling conclusion: we don't really have free will. So why then are neuroscientists trying to remove our free will? In the proceedings of the National Academy of Science by researchers in Germany has scientists backtracking on their original assumption that we have no free will. Researchers worked backwards in many ways from Libet's experiment using a form of brain-computer integration to see whether participants could cancel a movement set of the unconscious preparatory brain activity identified by Libet. If they could, humans can consciously intervene and veto processes that previously considered automatic and beyond willful control. More complex methods utilized, including the use of colored lights, but in short, they found easily undo actions and veto them of undeniable free will. A quote from lead researcher John Dillon Chartier University in Berlin becomes in order to discover how neuroscientists working for the deep state could override our own free will. A person's decisions are not at the mercy of unconscious and early brainwaves. Actively intervene in the decision-making process and interpret a movement. People have used the preparatory brain signals to argue against free will. Now shows that the freedom is much less limited than previously thought. These were supported by a French study which found that non-conscious preparatory brain activity identified by Libet is really just part of a fairly random ebb and flow of background, and that movements occur when this activity crosses a certain threshold. And even more studies confirm that we all suspected, regardless of early scientific findings, that we all act, perhaps to different degrees, but certainly with free will. Intention to move, this mindset feeds into the background ebb and flow of neural activity, but the specific decision to act only occurs when the neural activity passes a key threshold, and our all-important subjective feeling of deciding happens at this point, a brief instant afterward. All this leaves our common sense picture largely intact, they write, meaning that we can break a chain of events, determinism, but that also implies a certain responsibility for our actions. The cooperation of subconscious and conscious awareness. All these studies do suggest, though, that our free will requires healthy partnerships between conscious and unconscious systems. Circumstances like playing musical instruments, engaging in sports, or driving a car, we apparently specialized unconscious agents with the ability to carry out certain acts quickly with permission. If the unconscious agents program, then we can be controlled essentially by disabling our free will, at least according to pedantic science. Attempts to destruct free will. Drugs like Pulmane, I think that's how it's pronounced, known to wipe out its plates clean so that new, possibly nefarious programming can be installed, and obvious mind control techniques admittedly by the CIA with the help of Stanford neuroscientists and others, along with additional intelligence agencies of our government, there are subtle programming methods used every day, conscious messages and advertising. There are even cell phone apps meant to control the free will of the user. You can imagine what other technologies have been employed. Use your free will to override unwanted subconscious programming. If it requires both conscious and non-conscious compliance to remove free will, then we can at least interfere by conscious awareness and removing tacit consent. That ought to keep the for a while. At any rate, 8, wasting our tax dollars on more mind control experiments. For you today, if you enjoy what I'm here, give it a thumbs up and let me know. Don't forget to share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. That way you'll stay informed.